Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I need to tell you about something that happened 5 years ago. I was 28 and had been working two jobs for the past 3 years, saving every penny I could. I worked at a warehouse from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then rushed to my second job at a restaurant where I worked until 11 p.m. I lived in a tiny studio apartment that cost $800 a month, ate ramen noodles more than I cared to admit, and drove a beat-up Honda that broke down every other month. But I had a goal. I wanted to buy my own house. My parents had lost their home when I was 16 due to medical debt. We moved from rental to rental after that, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. I promised myself I would never go through that again. I would own my own place, and nobody could take it away from me. After years of sacrifice, I finally had $25,000 saved for a down payment. I found this amazing three-bedroom townhouse about an hour outside the city. It came with 10 acres of land, which was like a dream come true for someone who grew up in cramped apartments. The asking price was $120,000. The place needed some work, but it was mine. I hadn't told anyone about the purchase yet because I wanted to surprise my family once I was all moved in. Somehow, word got around anyway. Maybe the real estate agent mentioned it to someone, or maybe a neighbor saw me looking at the property. I don't know how, but my aunt found out before I had even gotten the keys. Now, let me tell you about my aunt. She's 52 years old and one of those people who thinks the world owes her everything. She's never held a steady job for more than 6 months, always has some excuse for why she can't pay her bills, and somehow expects everyone else to take care of her problems. She's been evicted from 3 different apartments in the past 2 years for not paying rent. The last eviction happened because she owed $3,000 in back rent. She's been crashing on various family members' couches ever since. My mom had let her stay for 2 months before finally kicking her out. My cousin let her stay for 3 weeks before she got tired of my aunt eating all her food and not contributing anything. My uncle lasted exactly 5 days before he told her to find somewhere else. She had burned through most of the family by the time she heard about my house. I was at work at the warehouse when my phone rang at 10:30 a.m. I saw her name on the caller ID and almost didn't answer, but I figured she might actually need something important for once. She called me without even saying hello and told me to have a key ready for her when she arrived to move in the next day. I was confused and asked her what she meant by moving in. She explained that she was going to live at the house and would allow me to live there too when I didn't cause problems or get too loud. She said she had already talked to my mom about it and that everyone thought it was a great idea. She was telling me she was going to live in my house and that she would allow me to live there too. I told her absolutely not, and that she would not be moving into my house. I explained that I had worked 3 years to save for this house and that it was mine. She laughed and said I was being selfish and that family helps family. She said since I was single and had no kids, I didn't need all that space anyway. I warned her that if she tried to move in, she would be thrown out. She completely ignored what I said and told me she was already packing her stuff and would be there first thing in the morning. She said I better have her key ready and then hung up on me. I immediately called my mom to ask if she had really told my aunt she could live with me. My mom was shocked and said she had never said any such thing. She told me my aunt had called her earlier asking for my address, claiming she wanted to send me a housewarming gift. My mom had given it to her without thinking twice. I sat there staring at my phone for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Then I got angry, really angry. This woman thought she could just move into my house without asking. The house I had worked 60-hour weeks to afford. The house I hadn't even moved into yet. The house that represented 3 years of sacrifice and planning. I called my supervisor and explained the situation. He let me leave work early so I could handle this mess. I drove straight to the police station. They transferred me to the local sheriff's department since the house was in their jurisdiction. I explained the situation to the deputy who answered. The deputy said that my aunt had no right to move into my house without permission. He told me that patrol cars would check the property regularly and remove anyone who wasn't supposed to be there. If they refused to leave, they would be arrested for trespassing. He also suggested I document everything in case this escalated further. I spent the rest of the day calling a locksmith to change all the locks on the house, even though I hadn't moved in yet. Better safe than sorry. The locksmith charged me $200, but it was worth the peace of mind. That evening around 6 p.m. I drove out to check on the property. Sure enough, there was a beat-up van parked in my driveway. I called the sheriff's department immediately. A deputy arrived within 15 minutes. We found my aunt trying to pry open a window on the back of the house. She had boxes and garbage bags full of her belongings scattered around the yard. When the deputy approached her, she claimed it was her house and that I had given her permission to move in. The deputy told her that wasn't true and that the owner didn't want anyone on the property. She argued with him for 10 minutes before he threatened to arrest her. She finally loaded her stuff back into the van and left, but not before shouting that this wasn't over. Not even an hour later, my phone rang. It was her. She screamed at me about how I dared to have the sheriff run her off from what she called her own house. She said I was being cruel and heartless for leaving family homeless. She threatened to call everyone in the family and tell them what a horrible person I was. I hung up and unplugged my phone for the night, but when I plugged it back in the next morning, my voicemail was completely full. 17 messages, all from her. The first few were angry rants about how I couldn't keep her out of what she kept calling her house. The later messages got more desperate, with her begging me to reconsider and promising she would be the perfect roommate. The last message was her demanding I call her back immediately or she would drive over there anyway. I saved all the messages and called the sheriff's department again. I asked if they could have an officer meet me at the house. I was planning to go over there to start moving some of my stuff in, and I had a feeling she might show up. The deputy I spoke with agreed to meet me there at 12 p.m. I loaded up my car with some boxes and headed over. I also brought copies of my mortgage paperwork and deed to prove ownership if needed. The deputy was already waiting when I arrived, which was reassuring. We hadn't been there more than 30 minutes when a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't my aunt's van this time. It was a different car with my aunt in the passenger seat and some guy I didn't recognize driving. My aunt got out, walked straight up to me, and held out her hand demanding I give her the key to what she called her house. I told her she wasn't getting a key and wasn't living there no matter what she thought. She pointed to the guy she came with and said he was her boyfriend and that they were both moving in. The boyfriend looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at the deputy. My aunt started screaming that it was her house and that she was going to live there whether I wanted her to or not. She was yelling loud enough that I'm sure any neighbors within a mile could hear. I just smiled, walked to the front door, opened it with my new key, stepped inside and locked it behind me. Through the window, I could see her face getting red. She tried to grab the doorknob and started pounding on the door, shouting that I couldn't keep her out of what she kept calling her house. The boyfriend tried to calm her down, but she pushed him away. I told her to tell that to the sheriff standing behind her. She spun around and came face to face with the deputy. Her expression changed completely. The anger was still there, but now there was fear too. The deputy told her she needed to leave the property immediately or she would be arrested for trespassing. She argued that it was her house and that I couldn't keep her out. The deputy asked her to show him any paperwork proving she owned the property. She said she didn't have any paperwork, but that family doesn't need paperwork. The deputy corrected her and explained that it was my house, that I owned it, and that I didn't want her there. He showed her my deed and mortgage papers. He made it clear she was trespassing and had no legal right to be there. The boyfriend apologized and said he didn't know the full situation. He told my aunt they needed to leave before things got worse. I opened the door and stepped back outside. I told her that before she left, I wanted to make something clear. I explained that just because she wanted something didn't mean she was going to get it. I emphasized that this was my house that I bought with my money after working 3 years to save for it. I warned her that if I ever saw her on my property again without my permission, I would have her arrested and her car towed at her expense. I also told her that I would file for a restraining order if she continued harassing me. The look she gave me was pure hatred that someone was actually standing up to her. I continued by telling her she wasn't welcome, and that I didn't care if she became homeless or how badly she needed a place to live. I made it clear this wasn't her solution and told her to leave before she got arrested. I reminded her that I had worked 2 jobs and sacrificed for 3 years to buy this house, and I wasn't about to let her waltz in and take it over. She stomped back to the car. The boyfriend was already in the driver's seat with the engine running. The deputy had to tell her to watch her language when she was getting in the car. Before they drove off, the deputy walked over to their car and had a quiet conversation with the boyfriend. I found out later he was explaining the legal consequences of trespassing and harassment. The deputy came back and commented that some people just don't understand boundaries. I agreed and told him she had always been like this, thinking everyone owed her something. He told me she wouldn't be bothering me there anymore and that they would keep an eye on the place. He also gave me his direct number and told me to call if she showed up again. Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. My aunt had called every family member she could think of to complain about me. She told them I had promised her the house and then changed my mind. She said I was being selfish and cruel for not sharing with family. Most of my family saw right through her lies, but a few of my more distant relatives called to lecture me about helping family in need. I had to explain the real situation to each of them. I told them how hard I had worked to save for the house and that my aunt had never been promised anything. I explained that she had simply decided she was entitled to live in my house without asking. Once they heard the truth, they understood and stopped calling. My aunt tried a different approach next. She started showing up at my workplace. She would wait in the parking lot until my shift ended and then follow me to my car. She would beg and plead for me to let her stay just temporarily until she found something else. When begging didn't work, she would start yelling and causing a scene. After the 3rd time this happened, I spoke to my supervisor. He banned her from the property and said security would remove her if she came back. I also filed a police report documenting the harassment. Over the next few months, I heard from various family members that she was telling everyone who would listen about how I had stolen what she called her house. She claimed she had been promised the house and that I had somehow cheated her out of it. The story got more elaborate each time she told it. In her latest version, she claimed my mom had promised her the house as payment for taking care of our grandmother years ago. This was completely false, since our grandmother had been in a nursing home for the past 10 years. I lived in that house for about 2 years. I fixed it up, added a deck, improved the landscaping, and really made it my own. I painted every room, installed new flooring, and even built a small workshop in the garage. When I decided to sell and upgrade to something bigger, I made a nice profit. The house sold for $160,000. The couple who bought it were great people, friendly but tough. The husband was a retired police officer, which made me feel even better about leaving them to deal with any potential problems. I made sure to warn them about my aunt and gave them copies of all the police reports. 3 months after I sold the house, I got a call from the new owner at 11:30 p.m. He told me I wouldn't believe what happened and explained that the aunt I had warned them about tried to break into their house that night. I asked if he was serious, and he said he was completely serious. He explained that his husband heard something around 12 a.m. and went to check. They found her trying to climb through a window in the back of the house. She had a flashlight and what looked like a crowbar. His husband, being a retired cop, nearly shot her, but recognized her from my description at the last second. I asked what happened next, and he told me the police arrested her on the spot. She was facing charges for trespassing, attempted breaking and entering, and possession of burglary tools. The judge gave her 30 days in jail, 100 hours of community service, 3 years probation, and a fine of $500. She also had to pay restitution for the damage to the window screen she had cut. The new owners decided to install a security system after that incident. They spent $1,500 on cameras and motion sensors. They sent me a copy of the footage from that night, and I forwarded it to the police for their records. I have to admit, I felt a little satisfied hearing that. Maybe now she would finally understand that actions have results. But I was wrong again. While she was in jail, she somehow got access to a phone and called my workplace. She left messages with the receptionist saying she was my aunt and that there was a family emergency. When I called back, she tried to guilt me into dropping the charges. She said she was sorry and that jail was terrible and that she had learned her lesson. I told her the charges weren't mine to drop and that she should have thought about the results before breaking into someone's house. When she got out of jail after serving her full 30 days, she tried a new approach. She started sending me letters. The first few were apologies, saying she understood now that she had been wrong. But when I didn't respond, they turned angry again. She threatened to sue me for emotional distress. She claimed I had traumatized her by having her arrested. I forwarded all the letters to my lawyer and to her probation officer. Her probation officer called me to let me know they were documenting everything. He said she was required to stay away from me and my property as part of her probation terms. Any contact with me would be a violation that could send her back to jail. It's been 5 years since all this started, and I've heard she has calmed down somewhat. She is living in a subsidized apartment about 2 hours away now. But according to family members, she still acts entitled and is actively trying to find out where I live now. She asked subtle questions about me whenever she talks to relatives. She wants to know if I'm married, if I have kids, where I work, and especially where I live. My family has learned not to give her any information about me. I bought a bigger place with 25 more acres, and this time I made sure no one in the family knows the address. I spent $230,000 on a beautiful ranch-style house with a 3-car garage and a barn. I've been there for 3 years now, and she still hasn't found me. I've also learned to be more careful about who I trust with personal information. I don't post pictures of my house on social media. I use a post office box for mail instead of my home address. I even had my lawyer set up a trust to own the property so my name doesn't appear in public records. Family or not, nobody has a right to take what belongs to you. Back in 2015, my life was falling apart piece by piece. I've been working in channel partner sales for a tech company, but my performance wasn't cutting it. When they told me I'd need to start working weekends, I had to walk away. My dad had just been diagnosed with cancer, and there was no way I was missing time with him for a job that was already on thin ice. My boss understood, we shook hands, and that was that. No hard feelings, but now I was unemployed. For 2 months I scrambled to find work while watching my dad fight his battle. The bills kept coming, but the job offers didn't. Then finally a breakthrough, a large company offered me a position that was everything I needed. Better pay, better title, better prospects. The only catch was I'd have to move across the country. Dad's cancer seemed to be going into remission, and he insisted I take the opportunity. I lived about 30 minutes from my parents at the time, so moving felt like abandoning him, but he wouldn't hear any arguments. The company was one of those massive short-term lending operations with over 1,000 locations nationwide. They were the biggest name in payday, loans, title loans, all that stuff. I wasn't thrilled about working for that kind of business, but I figured adults make their own financial decisions. Nobody was forcing them to take these loans, right? They knew what they were signing up for. At least, that's what I told myself. My job was to set up partnerships that would drive referrals to us from people who couldn't get traditional bank loans. I was good at it too. Within a few months, I'd ramped up our monthly revenue to over $1 million. Everyone seemed decent enough, except for this one guy I'll call the sergeant. He was ex-military and made sure everyone knew it. This guy watched the clock like a hawk, reported people to HR if they showed up at 9:05 instead of 9:00, left at 4:45 instead of 5:00, and made snarky comments about everyone and everything. Part of my responsibilities included auditing third-party applications to verify loans and calculate referral commissions. That meant reviewing the actual contracts people signed and all the terms and conditions. That's when I started seeing things that made my stomach turn. I saw people on welfare taking loans against their car titles with payment terms they'd never be able to meet. I saw elderly women taking personal loans against their social security payments to buy school books for their grandkids. These weren't just bad financial decisions, these were heartbreaking scenarios where desperate people were being set up to fail. With my background in business finance and business law from college, I could see exactly how screwed these people were the moment they signed those contracts. They'd lose their cars through repossession, be forced to sign over their social security checks, all because of clauses buried in contracts they probably couldn't even read properly. I started bringing these concerns to every executive and leader who would listen. They'd all nod and say they understood, but then nothing would change. I think deep down we all felt terrible about what this company was doing, but it was our livelihood. Something in my gut told me to start documenting everything, so I did. I didn't know what I'd do with the information, but I kept collecting it anyway. During store audits, I witnessed the sleazy tactics firsthand. Employees would use used car salesman pressure techniques to close loans. They'd intentionally avoid explaining that the 28% interest was monthly, not annual. They wouldn't mention that if you couldn't pay in full each month, you'd have to close the old loan and sign a new one with fresh interest, carryover balance, plus hundreds of dollars in new fees. Every single month. They were targeting desperate, financially illiterate people, knowing full well these customers could never pay off the loans. The company would milk them for every dollar, then repossess their cars and sell them at auction, or threaten to notify their employers and garnish wages. It was predatory in the worst possible way. I hated the company, hated the leadership that knew exactly what was happening and just shrugged it off. I knew it wasn't legal, and it definitely wasn't ethical. Following my instincts, I bought one of those mini handheld scanners and started printing off every Consumer Financial Protection Bureau violation I came across. I'd scan everything and save it all on an SD card at home. A few months later, my birthday was coming up. I planned to take a week off to celebrate with my family back home. Dad was getting sicker, and I had this terrible feeling it might be my last birthday with him. We had an incredible time together, definitely one of my top 5 family memories. We did everything we could think of, lived it up, and made every moment count. When it was time to return to work, I didn't want to leave. I promised my mom I'd come back in a heartbeat if she needed me. The next Monday after I got back, she called and told me Dad was in very bad shape and I needed to come home immediately. I ran straight to my boss. Let's call him my awesome boss because that's exactly what he was. I barely got the words out before he told me not to even think about it, to go home and come back when I was ready. That response meant everything to me. He understood that work wasn't important right now. He'll always have a special place in my heart for that moment. Here's some important context. The sergeant had been passed over for my awesome boss's position. From day one, he'd had it out for all of us, determined to get that job by any means necessary. Tuesday, the second day I was home, my awesome boss called with devastating news. He told me he'd been fired because the sergeant had complained to the CEO and COO about his lax approach to managing the team, specifically about letting me leave without approval. The sergeant was now my boss, and my awesome boss warned me that he'd probably fire me too when I got back. He just didn't want me to be blindsided with everything else I was dealing with. I stayed through the funeral, then flew back to face whatever was coming. 10 minutes after I walked into the office, the sergeant called me into his office and told me I'd violated company policy by taking unapproved time off and that we needed to talk to HR. I explained that my father had passed away and I'd had to be there for the funeral and to help my mother. He said he was sorry that happened, but company policy didn't excuse violations. His tone made it clear he wasn't sorry at all. The HR lady felt terrible about having to fire me. The COO himself had to deliver the news. I told her I'd only been there 4 months and had spent all my savings relocating for this job, which put me in a really difficult financial situation. She said she'd work hard to get me some severance since I didn't qualify for unemployment yet. That's when the sergeant chimed in and said I wouldn't qualify for unemployment anyway since I was being fired for non-compliance and excessive absences. The next day, the HR lady called and told me that the sergeant had contacted the COO to make sure I didn't get any severance. So there I was, broke 5 months into a 12-month lease, no job, no money, and without my dad to help me figure it out. I had to sell most of my belongings, pack up, and move back home to live with my mom. I tried to be civil about the whole situation, but the new boss and executive team had played dirty. Now it was time for some righteous revenge. I remembered my database of incriminating evidence that violated Consumer Financial Protection Bureau guidelines. I called my awesome boss to get his feedback and advice, and he said he wanted to help. Now we had a team. We spent weeks building a massive file to submit to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, documenting all the unfair and predatory lending practices. We knew we'd been somewhat complicit in the system, but we'd both voiced our concerns. Now we needed to make things right. I gave everything I had to my awesome boss, and together we provided the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with everything I'd witnessed in the brick-and-mortar locations. All the incriminating documents I collected, plus 2 detailed written statements about our concerns. We requested anonymity and submitted everything for investigation. We never heard back and assumed nothing would come of it. Unknown to us, there were thousands of complaints against the company by consumers, and what we provided helped build multiple cases. About 5 months later, in early 2016, my awesome boss called and told me the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had contacted him and that something big was about to happen. This led to a major consumer protection investigation, though we didn't know the scope at the time. Several more months passed without any visible results, so I figured they'd hired top-shelf lawyers and made it all disappear. Then came June of 2016. I was sitting at my mom's kitchen table drinking coffee and applying for jobs while watching CNBC in the background. When I heard the company's name mentioned, I turned up the volume and watched in amazement. They were getting hit with massive fines and legal fees. Their business had to stop all operations until the case was resolved. The final tally was almost $10 million in fines, over $20 million in legal fees, and about $50 million in lost revenue while the government pressed pause on their operations. All thanks to the sergeant. I later found out from a former co-worker that the sergeant himself had been fired and thrown under the bus. The company claimed he failed to report employee complaints to the executive team, even though the executives knew exactly what was happening. I told the COO multiple times that what we were doing was probably illegal, but they made the sergeant their sacrificial lamb. To this day, there are still tons of pending class action lawsuits and regional government actions against them. But it worked out well for me personally. Mom was so glad I was back home. She was having such a hard time without Dad around after 35 years of marriage. I used my downtime to learn a new career that pays much better, and I absolutely love what I do now. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.